personal experiences to inspire your writing. We are delighted to be joined today by Emma Decent, who explores her relationship with her mum in a one-woman show called I Don't Know What I'm Supposed to Be Doing. Emma was due to perform her show in our libraries, but that's not been possible due to COVID. So we've asked Emma to join us today to talk about her show, share some extracts from the show, and discuss how the creative process of writing about her mum helped her understand her feelings as her mum developed dementia. Okay, so I'll introduce you to Emma. Good morning, Emma.
Hi, Nicola.
Hi. And also Chris Longdon, our writer in residence.
Hi, everybody.
And also Louise Murray. Yeah.
Hello.
Good morning, Louise. Hello.
Morning.
Louise will be doing a question and answer session with Emma a bit later on in the session. Okay, so I'm going to start us off by sharing with you the first scene from Emma's show, which gives you an insight into her show. So, okay.
When my mum first started with dementia, she used to say, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. She'd be wandering around, forgotten what she'd started, uncertain of her purpose. To begin with, I tried to reassure her, but it's a difficult question to answer. When she moved into a care home, her life became truly and properly purposeless. You don't have to do anything there. I'd say things like, well, what is it you'd like to be doing? She didn't know the answer to that either. Dementia is a great unlearning. I got a book out of the library about it once, and it explained that everything is learnt, and similarly everything can be unlearnt. That's what's happening with dementia. You wouldn't think you could unlearn everything. How to read, how to feed yourself, who your children are. But you can. Mum always loved to read. It was sad when she couldn't anymore. I found a lot of quote books from her reading after she died. I found this quote in one of them. And thou shalt in thy daughter see, this picture once resembled thee. That's by Ambrose Phillips. I could tell you 1,000 stories about Mum's dementia, but this is a different story.
Hi, Emma. It's lovely to see you again. Please, could you tell us what made you decide to do the show?
Well, it was a long process, as you can imagine. But to sort of, I suppose it really started, I did do a show about my dad after his death. He died 6 years before my mum. And when after that show and my father's dying, my mother continued, to be around. She had dementia, and I felt that, and I was I'm a writer, a poet, a performer. I felt there was probably a show to be had about my mum and as well, but I didn't really explore it till after she died. And I felt a little bit sort of like always a bit of a horrible thing to do, to sort of make a show out of my poor mother's last years or whatever, but it did feel like quite a process, really. So it took a while, but that was kind of the process, I suppose. Yeah.
Thank you. That's lovely. So how about, could you tell us just a little bit more about your mum and how she was a positive role model in your childhood, please?
Yeah, yeah, my mum was, a fabulous sort of personality. She was very had a lot of opinions. She was quite political. She was always a member of like the Labour Party. She was very intelligent. She got a pretty good education for a woman of her generation. She got a degree and a master's degree, and she was a librarian. So, she was always very positive about things like justice and equality and education. And she wanted me and my brother and sisters, to read books, and we went to theatre and things like that. So she really, gave me a lot of positive things. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. So, do you think the happy memories of your childhood outweigh the difficult times with your mum?
Yeah. Well, again, that's been a process, I suppose, because in this, I'll kind of share some of the story with you as we do the performances. But yeah, when I was a sort of teenager, my relationship, as is often the case for probably most people, and a lot of mothers and daughters, became more fraught. Not really in a conflict kind of a way, but my mother kind of I realised as I got a little bit older, moving out of childhood, that my mum had a bit of a drinking problem, and this had quite a profound effect on me and my brother and sister. And that did cause me to feel more alienated from her and quite angry with her. And that, persisted really, I have to say, for a long time in a way. We think we put our mothers up on pedestals, and when they fall off, we're not particularly, it's not always easy to let go of that. So as a young adult into my later adolescence, 20s and 30s, I did feel quite angry with her for that kind of thing. But as I've got older and really in the process of my mum's aging and my aging and processing things, and through her old age, really, with the dementia, I felt a lot more sort of understanding and forgiveness and kindness towards her. And, I do remember my childhood and her very fondly now, and those difficult times, they've just sort of dissipated really, in terms of feeling anything strong about it.
Yeah. Do you think you and your mum had a difficult relationship at the time because you were so similar?
Possibly. I think my mum probably did. We were similar, which was a nice thing in lots of ways, as it often is. But I think my mum also probably projected quite a lot onto me of her own. I think she was quite frustrated. That's one of the reasons why she probably drank a bit. She was very intelligent. I think she probably would have really enjoyed a career in academia or something like that, but she couldn't do that. She was a mum. She was a school librarian, so she worked as much as she could because she liked to work. But there was a lot of, it's hard to work and be a mum. As a lot of women know. So I think on me, I was the next generation. I think she probably wanted me to do things that she couldn't do, as a lot of mothers often, parents do with their kids. But you're not your mother's, reincarnation. You're your own person and got your own ideas and
That's right.
ambitions and personality sort of thing. So, yeah.
So, you were obviously very capable. Do you think your mum's drinking affected your chances and your success?
I think it did, in the sense that it affected me quite a lot emotionally. I think psychologically, I think I felt I had to kind of be a good girl for my mum so that she wouldn't be upset and wouldn't have a drink and stuff like that. And I think it made me kind of more inhibited. I was quite a lively, showy off kind of a child, but as I got into my adolescence, I started to lose my nerve. And I think it did make it harder for me to sort of just go out into the world and think my job now is to fulfill myself. I always felt a bit like in the shadow of that experience, and like I spent a long time trying to sort of get over it, if you like. So, but at the same time, I wouldn't blame my mum at this point. I think, you respond to your situation yourself. You have to take responsibility for your own response to things. And, I recognise now that she was doing her best. And in lots of ways, she gave me loads of life chances, because, as I say, she supported my education, and, I was born into a world where women particularly had a lot more opportunities than her generation and her mother's generation, so, yeah.
So would you like to tell us a bit about your mum as seen through the eyes of some of her friends, that she met when she was at university?
Yeah. Well, yeah, she went to university. She made some lovely friendships there. She went to Leeds. And, in the show, I kind of include, we'll go to that in a moment, I think. But I include not just my version of my mum, but some testimonies from some people who knew her particularly as a peer, because I do find that fascinating. And particularly when a parent dies, you get all these stories coming at you from people that you didn't really know that well, but they're obviously your mum's, your parents' friends. And they've got all these stories of this woman who, made jokes and, did this and did that you've never heard. And you sort of suddenly realize my mum wasn't just my mum. She was this whole human being. She had a whole life before I was in the picture. And you'll never know your parent as a peer. It's just impossible, but it's fascinating. And I wanted in the show it not just to be my version of my mum, but a kind of to flesh it out with photos, with testimonies and stuff. So that's kind of part of the structure of the piece.
Okay, that's fabulous.
Thank
you.
Okay, are we going? I think, are we having the next performance now? And I'll put the slideshow up.
That'd be
yes,
great.
please.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So
this is from an early part of the show where I'm talking about my mum when I was a child. So ready when you are, Nicola. We didn't exactly fit into that area, the suburban southeast. Everyone else on our street read the Times or the Telegraph. My mum and dad read the Guardian. They were a mixed marriage of sorts. My dad Jewish, mum not. They'd both travelled, lived abroad, met lots of different people. We had things like spaghetti bolognese and stuffed peppers for tea, which for 1970s family cooking was considered somewhat exotic. Dad cooked as well as mum, and mum worked as well as dad. Most of my friends' parents didn't do that. Mum had Radio 4 on all the time, a radio on in every room, the sounds and voices following her around, keeping her company. Desert Island Discs, The Archers, Women's Hour. She always listened to the news. At weekends, we went on trips, the Science Museum, Hampton Court, the Tower of London. We saw Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at the West End, and Les Miserables for its original production at the Barbican. We got the cassette of the music and listened to it for years afterwards. Mum loved books. There were loads all over the house. She was a librarian by profession. She worked in a school library when we were growing up. She always encouraged us to read. She brought home the best new children's fiction from her library for us to read first, and we went to the local library every fortnight. Mum brought me The Colour Purple by Alice Walker to read when it was first published in 1981. Reading that book completely changed the way I looked at the world. Mum gave me that with books.
That was lovely. So do you think that your relationship with your mum mirrors the relationship she had with her mum? Because you all seem to be very sort of strong characters.
Yeah, there is a sort of short part of the show where I talk about my grandma, and really in a sense I'm speculating on this because I couldn't be entirely sure. But my grandma, my mum's mum, she kind of broke conventions in her own way, in that she managed to not be a mill girl, which was what was kind of probably the most likely path for her to follow, Lancashire lass, but to become a little bit more educated, and she became a school teacher. So then my mum, she was the first in her family to go to university, and I'm sure my grandma was very proud of her. But I also imagine there were, I don't know why, but I have a sense, my mum and my grandma differed a little bit politically, that there was perhaps jealousies between between generations, which, you know, not in a really hard, horrible way, but I think my mum was a bit jealous of the opportunities I had that she didn't have, and maybe my grandma was a little bit jealous of her daughter, my mum, because she could go to university and travel and stuff. You know, I don't know for sure, but I feel I'm quite blessed to have had that inheritance down the matriarchal line, if you like. You know, my mother and I, you know, we all kind of, we've sort of built on one another's so I don't know, successes or opportunities, if you like. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So, you know, before we were talking about your mum and her friendships. So she obviously really enjoyed her time at university, and you said that she felt, you know, she was obviously very proud of the fact that she got a degree and everything. So do you think she did feel resentful having to have, you know, like she got to the age of 30 and thought, gosh, I better get married and have a family. And then sort of you're there and you're able to sort of pursue what you want to pursue. So do you think there was a bit of resentment there from your mum because you were able to go and do what you wanted to do, whereas she felt that even though she had been to university, she then had to settle down with a husband and a family? Do you think that? Do you think that might have been why she sort of drank, and she might have just felt frustrated?
I think she wanted to get married and have children, you know, but I think it was that, you know, she married in the late 60s, you know, feminism was coming. She would have identified as a feminist, she did. And I think it was unknown at that point, really, that there's a lot of women that subsequently know is you sort of can't have it all, you know what I mean? And I don't think she realised, you know, she was quite resentful of the fact that she had to become a housewife, you know, you know, even though she had 3 children and a husband. And my dad wasn't bad, you know, he did help out a bit. He wasn't as bad as some, you know, blokes who won't lift a finger or whatever, you know. But she was angry that she was expected to do all the laundry and all the cleaning and all that kind of thing. And I think she wasn't resentful of my opportunities, but I think, you know, in a way it's that's I think it's Gloria Steinem said something like, you know, about living your mother's unlived life kind of thing. And now I feel like I have, in a way, because I didn't marry, I haven't had children, and I kind of do not exactly what I want, but I have a lot of freedom. I'm self-employed, and, you know, I think she'd be quite envious of me living on my own with all my books. You know, it was a kind of a parallel life, if you like. I think, you know, it's just the choices you make, and there are gains, and, you know, there's losses to me as well in not having children, but there's gains in having a lot more independence and a lot less responsibility for others. So, you know, it's just the sort of the choices women have, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. So did her dementia leave you feeling that you'd lost her before you could settle things?
Well, to be honest, I never really thought we'd settle things in the real world, if you like, you know, face to face. Obviously, when somebody gets dementia, any opportunity you've got to have a sort of sensible conversation about anything is taken from you. But I think I'd attempted at various points in my life to try to talk about how it had been, you know, and I think my siblings probably did as well a bit, you know, sort of how it had been when we'd been growing up, and those conversations didn't really go anywhere. So it felt like me coming to terms with those things would be something I'd have to do myself, you know, in different ways, including creative ways, you know, with this. Yeah. Do you want to see a little bit, or shall I read a bit about?
Lovely. Yeah. Yes,
okay, please. So I'll just do this next bit, which without slides. This is about when my mum was drinking at home. So I suppose I've shown you a little bit of childhood, and this is a little bit about adolescence. And one of the factors of my mum's drinking, unfortunately, was she used to get very angry and agitated, and you know, cause a scene, if you like, in So this follows from one of those moments. There was nothing you could do to calm her. My mum's drinking was the biggest thing going on in my life when I was a teenager. I wanted to help her. She wanted to stop. I got information for her about groups and helplines. She talked about living on her own, of leaving my dad. I tried to support her. I just wanted her to be happy. But nothing I did made any difference. She carried on drinking, shouting, complaining about her life, dad, us, till she passed out in a chair, snoring. I felt useless. I stopped inviting friends over. It was unpredictable and embarrassing. And I was ashamed of her. How could she let herself get into this state, think of no other solution to her problems? I couldn't believe it of such an intelligent woman. It felt like I was the grown-up, that I had to hold it together for her and everyone. I didn't know how to be an adolescent. I could see all my friends doing it, boyfriends, parties, but it scared me. I was out of fashion. I didn't know how I felt about anything. How are you? Felt like a loaded question. How was I? I don't know. What did Mum need to hear? I was fine. But actually, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And it felt like part of me had gone missing. I couldn't go to Mum like I used to. She'd worry, get drunk. I was on my own. So that's kind of the point in the story, and I suppose in the script and in my life, where I was beginning to separate from my mum and stop putting her on the pedestal.
Yeah.
I mean, the story as well is a little bit not just about my mum and her dementia, but it's about other rites of passage, like being a young person and having to navigate the challenges of that.
So her anger towards you, it must have felt awful, because she wasn't there for you, and you were going to university and going through all the things of being away from home and making new friends and everything, and the one thing you need when you're doing that is the support of your mum, really. And so it must have been very difficult, feeling like you had to sort of listen to her and kind of look after her, and yet you also had to make your own way, going to uni. And I know myself, my first year at university, I felt very the first 3 months I really struggled, because I come from a very close family, so I really struggled being away from all the family. But equally, I think if you're having problems at home and you don't think you've got that sort of rock, it must have really sort of affected you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it did. I think the key thing was that, like you say, it's like I didn't feel I could bring any of my own problems or needs to my mum, because it would worry her and upset her, and she'd drink. And so I just kind of learned how to not have problems or difficulties, which isn't really very good from a psychological point of view. But and I did struggle, at university. I wasn't at my best, and I was probably, didn't really have great, mental health, I would say. I didn't probably call it that at the time, but definitely wasn't great. And I guess, I sort of knew it was to do with my upbringing to some extent. And it's, took me quite a long time to sort of work it all out, and it was tricky. But, when I would challenge my mum about it, she'd always say, well, the drinking hasn't got anything to do with you, and, got anything to do with you and your brother and sister. But that didn't really help, because it did have something to do with us, because we were affected by it, all the time, and felt like if we had a problem, it caused a problem for her, It wasn't like.
So did your siblings feel that as well? Did they feel the same way as you? Did you ever talk about it between yourselves?
I suppose I couldn't speak on their behalf directly. I think we all experienced it in different ways, I think I was more trying to please, and, perhaps, my siblings were more rebellious about it and just said, I'm not going to toe the line, and I think we were all affected differently, and and that's what's interesting as you get older as well. When you talk to your siblings about your childhood, you think you've got the story paved, but actually, 3 children, even though we're quite close in age, have very different memories of probably of the same family life.
I think it's going back to that kindred spirit thing as well with you and your mum, with you being similar. She probably felt like, you might be able to relate more to what she was sort of saying to you.
Yeah.
She was feeling.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think what happened in that dynamic, was that mum kind of took to me as a bit of a sort of solace and confidant and support role. When I took to that role quite well at the time, because it did, I say it in the script, it did make me feel loved by her and important to her and cherished by her as well, and special. But it wasn't really right. She should have been looking after me, I suppose, more than me looking after her.
Yeah.
That's how it ought to be, isn't it?
So how did you initially cope with the dementia then, with her dementia?
Again, that's sort of a long journey. I think to begin with, probably because I was still feeling leftover irritations with her, and because she was still drinking right to the end of her life, not as much probably when she was older, but I wasn't. I suppose when she first started to have dementia, there was a degree of anger about it, and it's like, I'm not getting dragged into this role again, of like supporting my mum sort of thing, when I was just sort of getting my life together as an adult in my 30s and 40s, and I suppose there were sort of mirrors in the sense that my mum was quite angry and aggressive eventually with her dementia, which isn't an easy dynamic. But I did recognise quite early on, I think, that this was the beginning of the end of my time with my mum. That was the reality. That's what was going on. And I had to decide, do I want this? I want to use this time to feel more peaceful about her and with her, or not, so it became a sort of more of a conscious choice to be as loving as I could with her, to move on from the past. And then as somebody becomes much more vulnerable, she's not this. When I was a child or a teenager, I suppose she'd be this really huge character in the family with a lot of power as the mother and, storming around or whatever. But when she's an older lady, with dementia and getting frailer and more vulnerable, you just kind of feel much more compassionate, much more forgiving, and much more, understanding. So it helped me in a way, even though dementia was very challenging, to sort of let go of other stuff. And I was nearest to my parents geographically of my siblings, so I had quite more of a role in supporting them, and with changes that we had to make with moving out of the house and going into care and appointments and all that kind of stuff. And although at the time there was resentment from me at times, I did resent having that role, not entirely, but to the extent in which it was sort of sideswiping my own activities a bit. At the same time, I think it is an opportunity to reconcile with your parents and just make the most of what you've got, because they will go, they're going, and it's, you don't want to go when you're feeling kind of angry and stuff. No. If you can make shifts in that. Do you want to see a little bit of
Yes, please.
Prime? This is actually,
yes, please.
Nicola's on standby.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'll run the show.
And shall I just explain what it is?
Yep. Okay.
So this is in the show, when I perform it live. I'm standing in a library or in a theatre space or something, delivering the show and doing a sort of lot of talking, but I also show slides and run some sound. And this is one of them that we were talking about, Louise and I, just now, with a friend of hers, her best friend of her life, really, a friend, Valeria Val. In
the 50s, Brenda and I worked together at Manchester Reference Library. I lived at home with my auntie and uncle, and Brenda had her own flat in Manchester. One day we were talking to Brenda's landlady, who said, "Now there are two clever girls." Brenda and I glanced over our shoulders to see who the clever girls were, when we realised to our surprise that she meant us. We used to go to crummy old cinemas to see films that didn't play at ordinary theatres any longer. We saw Richard III with Laurence Olivier so many times we could carry on entire conversations in quotes from that play. If one of us was carrying our shopping, the other would say, set down thine honourable load." We used to go to the library theatre as well as to other theatres to see plays in Manchester. We often went on hikes with people from the library. During our lunch break, we would eat our lunches in about 3 minutes, usually before most people had sat down. Then we spent the rest of the hour shopping. I will always remember what wonderful times we had together. Brenda was the best friend I ever had.
Yeah, so that was Mum and Val, and
That was lovely to see an insight into her as a young person, and also again you probably could see sort of a bit of yourself in her as well.
Yeah, and I think it's nice as well to see the humour, in her and Val, and it's quite interesting because quite often at the end of the show people have said, "Oh, I remember being that age, before I got married and I was independent and just messing around with my friends," and it seems like a real sort of pleasant special time for a lot of women, and it, as I tell the story in the show of my mum, I want to get a sort of rounded sense of her, and that was her, I suppose at the beginning of her adult life with everything to look forward to and hope for and everything. And
yeah, because I think we're all sort of in danger of just seeing our mums as, sort of there making tea, looking after us, and then as they get older, as the little old lady sat in the chair, and this just shows how vital they were, and like you say, the sense of humour, and
definitely.
and how they used to go dancing and all this sort of thing. And they say, don't they, that a lot of people that have dementia, they can remember a lot better things that happened when they were younger than what's happened yesterday. They say that's a very sort of prevalent thing that happens. So it's nice.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. And sort of now when I remember my mum, it's kind of interesting. I often think about her in a way that I never knew her in real life, but almost as if we would, if we'd met at the same age as one another, we probably would have been really good pals, and had a lot in common, and and it's quite nice I like watching that film. I had a bit of
do you think that's helped you as well, be able to reconcile with your mum, sort of finding out about how she was before things happened?
I think I feel more understanding, but I think at that age, you hope to have a wonderful life, at the beginning of your adventures kind of thing, and I know, as we all know now as you get a bit older, that it doesn't pan out like that. Doesn't mean it goes terribly wrong, but there's lots of challenges and lots of choices, and you don't realize you're making them till they're made, and all that kind of stuff. And now I can sort of see my mum as just another young woman trying her best to make a life for herself and be the best person she could be, and that's all I'm trying to do, and this kind of sort of running thread through the show of the title, which is I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's like that's this kind of thing that comes up with that my mum said with dementia. But at any point in my life or her life, you might say, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
And especially at the moment with what's going on in the world, I think a lot of people will be saying, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing.
And it's just like being able to say, I feel a bit clueless, I'm just trying my best,
Yeah, that's right. So you obviously became reconciled towards the end of your mum's life with everything. And did you feel, I mean, obviously you missed your mum a lot when she passed, but did you feel that being able to spend that time with her and talk to her, and do you think it helped?
Oh, definitely. Like I said, I mean, we didn't talk in a sort of sensible way, if you like, but I do think spending time with her was helpful to me, and we did have some quite sweet times together, you know, like, you know, you might know if you've had anyone in your life with dementia, you know, I'd sing songs to her and things like that. And
so
yeah.
have you got something that you'd like to finish off with for us?
Yeah, I've got another couple of bits, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be lovely, thank you.
So this bit is just, this is a little bit more in the end of the show sort of, I feel like, is in sections. So this is this bit where it starts to break down slightly because of my mum's dementia. So this is just a short bit about that. She hated it at the care home. When she arrived, she tore all the pages out of one of the family photo albums and propped them up around the room to remind herself of who she was. She wrote, "Why am I here?" in felt tip pen on the wall. She banged on the fire exits, shouting, "I want to go home." Once I found her looking intently into a mirror. That person is very familiar, but I can't think who it is. At the end of a visit, she said to me, "So how are your mother and father?" I started dreaming about her. In the dreams, she wandered away and never said goodbye.
It's lovely.
I think that's a common image of dementia, actually. It is that sense they call it the long goodbye, don't they? You know, that they're going, but you know, you just never get you never get a moment to say goodbye.
Because you, in a way, you sort of lose them twice, don't you, really, with it? So yeah, it's the awful modern day plague, I think. But that was really moving, and I'd just like to say thank you, Emma. I thought that was amazing, and I know looking after my own elderly mum, it is very difficult because the roles get reversed, and you know, although she doesn't have dementia, it can be quite challenging. And I think everybody should, hopefully when we can go and see performances again, I think everybody should go and see this performance. I know I'm really looking forward to it myself. Sorry, I've got a bit croaky. So thank you very much. Right, I'll hand over to Nicola now. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise.
Okay. Thanks, Louise.
Okay, all right, Emma. So next we've got Christina, our writer in residence, has a few questions for you.
That's great.
Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you so much. That was just wonderful.
Oh,
and I didn't have any tissues, so I had to grab some bog roll. It was really lovely. Thank you. And Louise, your questions were fantastic as well. So that to be honest, Louise has asked so many of the things that I would have asked you anyway. So I don't want to kind of go back over, you know, some of the things that you've talked about, but just to say thank you for your honesty, because I know I guess that leads into my question, which is talking about life writing, which I'm doing a session on it early March. From my background, I suppose from my class background, whatever you want to call it, it's an absolute no. You do not talk about your life, your family's life. You know, the only way I've been able to get around this in writing is by writing the history of my very extraordinary ancestor. But you know, that's 4 generations removed, so that's kind of easy. Even then, though, I've had massive guilt over the creative interpretation of his life and my great-great-grandmother's life. And when I talk about that, people think I'm crazy, because it's like, well, you know, they died years ago. Does it matter? But to me, it's an integrity thing. And the thing that I loved the most about when I first started reading your work at your website was you absolutely said, you know, is this something that, you know, am I making something out of this for me? Am I profiting from this? I don't mean financially. I mean the storytelling. And I suppose that's what my question is really is, how would you advise people to get over that? You know, fair enough, it's a feeling and feelings are valid. How would you advise them to push beyond that as a writer, to just do it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I suppose I would, as you say, initially, I would just say, do it, in the sense of write it, because there's lots of stages to this. First of all, there's writing it. And there's the second question is really the next question, which is, are you going to take it public in some way? And that's when you can start to think, oh, I'm not sure, and all that, you know. And I think for me, because I'd already done this show about my dad, and that was about, I won't go into it too much because it's probably another whole conversation. But that's about discovering a secret about him, basically, on his death, that he'd had another child. And I wanted to explore that creatively. And the only person who could have been directly kind of hurt by it at that time was my mum. And my mum had advanced dementia at that time, so she couldn't be hurt by it. But I did run it loosely by my siblings, to see what they would feel. And then when it came to my mum, I felt like, I don't know, I think people can be affected by what you do, and you have to navigate that. And I went to a session with another performer writer once who said, you could ask them straight, if you want to write about your mum and dad, you could ask them how they feel about it, and if they, just see how you do that. But I also think you've got to, when I think about my experience with my mum, and, I don't know how pleased she'd be that I've told the world that she had a drink problem, for example. But I also feel like in the whole piece, you get a sense, most people come out of the show saying they think she's fabulous, which is what I want, really, that she wasn't, but not perfect. She had great qualities and she had great imperfections. She had her own imperfections, but she was human. And so it's kind of like, I suppose, how you craft the whole story when you're writing about other people. And, in your case, Christina, I would say, obviously there is that whole thing about generations ago and all that. But the other thing is, you'll never tell the whole truth about anything because it doesn't exist. So it's always going to be your version as a writer or as a family member. It's always going to be your interpretation. But I think that was why I was quite keen in my show about my mum to put other voices in, because I didn't want it to be me telling, because probably if my siblings, they haven't seen the show yet, if they saw it, they might disagree, or they might say, oh, I didn't know she was like that with you, or they might, and it's like, well, I'm not the last word on my mum. This is just my story. So I think if you own it as well for yourself and say, I'm not saying that's you, or that's my mum, or that's my grandfather, or whoever.
And it's good that you've got that relationship with your siblings as well, because if you don't have, the people that don't have, this is something that you can't even bounce it past them, can you? It's in a family history, everybody feels invested in for whatever reason. It's not just your mum's story, it's your siblings' story. It's all these it's these friends as well, close friends that she had. So it's not for the faint-hearted, is it? I don't think, doing what you do.
Yeah, and I think as well, what I've tried to do very carefully in my two shows really is sort of keep the focus quite narrow, so that even though, like with my siblings, we don't sort of have loads of contact and stuff, but they're mentioned in the show, but I don't mention them a lot or much detail about them, because that's their life and their privacy, and I don't want that's their story if they want to write it and tell it, So I try to keep the focus on my mum. And like when I did my dad's show, one of the questions people quite often asked is, what did your mum think about all this? Because I barely mention it in the show, because I just think, well, because this is about dad and I don't know what mum thought about that. So I'm not, so in the mum show, the focus is on her and on my relationship with her. And there are other characters. Obviously, my dad was there, my siblings were there, but their version of that would be their story to tell.
I think that's I guess that's a bit from anybody who's watching this today who's interested in writing, whether it's a story to do with having had dementia in the family, or caring for somebody professionally, because the care for professionals out there who care for elderly people or people who aren't as old who've got dementia have got some amazing experiences and really positive stuff that we can gain from them, and I also think we should encourage them to write their experiences down. Obviously, there's an issue of people's identities that needs to be protected. But I've got a couple of friends who are in the 70s and 80s who have desperately wanted to write their life stories down. One of them, her mother, who was now passed away, said, "Well, I'm writing it all down, and no one's allowed to see this until I've passed." Which I just thought, wow, that's such a that might be the Pandora's box moment, but it's something that so many of us don't have these conversations with different generations, and we're not privileged to have them, or we just miss them because we're talking about what the weather's doing or what's going on today.
Yes.
That kind of leads me to my next question, which is really, when my nana died of dementia, and I was in my 20s, early
Right.
20s, and my mum obviously had to go through the whole caring issues, the looking after her, just seeing this deterioration in her mum. And I'm watching my mum, watching her mum, but then I've got my own relationship with my nan. One of the things that really hit me at that point, and I was actually working in a profession that worked with people with dementia anyway, was that I had had conversations with my nana, and on those years leading up to her dementia really becoming full blown, about her past as a little girl. And when she did die, I was able to say to my mum said to me, "Oh, I found my granddad's grave. He was killed in World War One. It was this battle. We're going to go and see it." And she said, "No, I never knew this." I said, "But I knew that. How did you know? This is your granddad." But Nana married again, so she only knew this man when she was 4 or 5. And she told me the story of when he came back from World War One, and she was a tiny little tot.
Yeah.
He was killed, unfortunately, not long after. But she told me, the granddaughter, this story, but not ever told my mum it. And that just hit me, because I thought, wow, and with my own children, they hear things all the time from my parents that I've never heard. And I think if there's anything to learn from this, it's about doing what you've done, which is writing down your own version. And as far as you can, your mum's version. You'll never get it perfect, will you? But that, to me, is the process of the intergenerational side of it that's really hit me. And the other bit, which kind of leads me to my real question, which is, when I was sort of working in this area, one of the things that I read that really struck me was, I love the fact that you've said dementia is about an unlearning process. That really hits it home for carers, and this purposelessness, but also it's unresolved anxieties and unresolved traumas in some people, not in everybody. But with my nan, I kept hearing something over and over and over again from the past. My mum couldn't quite tap into this the way that I could. I think probably because I was that bit more removed from the emotional side of it. And I just wondered whether you kind of came across, you talk about her anxiety, which was part of the drinking issue as well. But was there anything else that you came across that you thought, that is so important to maybe what the distress that she's experiencing is in the dementia?
I do think that a lot of her anger when she had dementia was related to unresolved stuff, and in a way it was kind of like a lesson to me, because when I observed that, I felt like, it was almost a lesson in whatever you haven't resolved in yourself, do it before you get dementia, because there's no chance after that, really. I mean, the blessed thing really about the whole thing in the end for my mum was that she was quite peaceful at the end of her life, the very end of her life. But if I do think she had frustrations, and unfulfilled ambitions and stuff. And then, when she retired, she did become less angry as she, she was very, active person in her 60s and 70s, and, still completely compos mentis for a long time, and, did stuff. But I imagine that underneath that, there were still sort of, frustrations with her life, that she'd not quite done this or done that. And possibly I feel a bit, it's kind of interesting when I think about my mum now, because I think, we didn't really get really close again. And, I don't know how she felt about that. She might have felt terribly sad about that, that, she wasn't close to her her daughter, as we might have been. And so, she probably did, like all of us do, have leftover feelings. And I think they can come out of dementia, in terms of behavior, because all the inhibitions go and all the social niceties go, and so
I think even in ordinary times, we're not living in ordinary times at the moment, but even in ordinary times, there's so much stuff and so much baggage that we don't feel we can share for whatever reason. Maybe we've never been given the tools to do that. But I know, without wanting to minimize, the experience that people are having now, if you've lived through a war or a violent conflict, that is just absolutely instant. That's going to be stored away for most people in a box somewhere. Even now, you can have a fantastic relationship with your family and your parents, and we're all we're all in completely different circumstances, and as you know, a lot of the time it's being careful what you do say to people, because they're having a completely different experience to the one that you're having.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's really important to have had this discussion with you today, because now more than ever, I think if you can write, and if you've never written before, please have a go at writing out your experiences, especially in relationship to your family at the moment, especially for those of us that can't be with our family.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff going on that we just don't know how it's going to affect us in the future.
No.
And you know, writing is probably one of the best forms of therapeutic
I agree.
you do on your own than anything, isn't it?
I definitely agree with that, and I think, you know, that links up with your earlier question as well, that, like, you know, you can write about your experience or your memories or your trauma at any time. It doesn't have to be something that you're going to take public, you know, just as a sort of therapeutic, cathartic process. And I'm really into that. I mean, and really that's where a lot of the material for all my work kind of comes from. And so there'll be like a ton of very personal writing rambling away, you know, and I'll take a fraction of it out and maybe put it into something. So it's like giving yourself and any listeners, you know, permission to write. You know, I sort of facilitate sessions sometimes, you know, and people say, well, I can't write about that because so and so would be upset. And it's like, well, they don't even have to know about it at this point. You can still write about it. It can be very private writing, you know, write, you know, just for yourself, you know, like the family member you were talking about who wanted to write their story but not have anyone read it while they were still alive. You know, that's an important process for that person to go through. It doesn't mean it has to be published or spoken out loud or anything.
I think that's the creative bit, isn't it? Because you can write the factual stuff and the really yucky stuff that you never want anybody ever to see. But if your ambition is to write so that people do see stuff that you've written, like exactly that you've done. I was listening to everything that you were saying, and I'm thinking that is a gem that you've probably got out of a long piece of writing that you did, and you've spotted that bit and you've used it. And I think that's my message to people, which is, if you do want to show your writing to other people and you enjoy writing, you can still write all the yucky stuff and just grab the bits that will work in a piece of whether it's a piece of performance or whether it's just, you know, a story or a book that you want to have published. There's you know, I'm the world's worst person for crying when I'm deleting all the stuff that I've written because it's not up to the standard that I want, or there's too much of it. There's nothing. It's a process. That's the bit that I have to remember all the time. With is it isn't an output, it's a process, and there will be outputs from it.
Yeah, definitely. And very much so with life writing as well, I think, because, you know, one's life is this huge complex thing, and I've managed to get my mum's life and mine into like a sort of 70-minute show, but obviously there's like millions of details that are not in it because you can't put it all in. So it's like, it's very complex unraveling things. And like you say, you know, particularly if there's something that has been a real issue for you, if you were to read back through your own diaries, there'd be like so much repetition of, oh, well, you know, I'm going on again about this thing, you know. But it's the process, you know. It doesn't mean that's going to be, you know, the final edit kind of thing, but it's still a very valid thing to do. And I've got a lot of support from that for myself, sort of self-support.
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing about it at this moment in time, where you can't go to a writing group. Even you might be able to get somebody online that helps you in a group or whatever, but when you physically can't have that person smiling and nodding and saying, well, maybe just right now, it doesn't. You can do a lot of this on your own, but you have to pick up the pen or get to the keyboard, don't you? And I'm on the life writing issue as well. If anybody does want to tune in March, the first Thursday in March, I will be doing a life writing issue with Bruce Crowther, who's the founder of the Fair Trade movement, who's writing about how it all began. So that'll be fun. But thank you so much, Emma, because I think I've sat here and gotten so much out of it personally, and I'm sure I know a lot of people are watching live, but also there'll be people watching on View Again on YouTube. So I think now Nicola, Nicola's got hand over to you. You've got something else to say, haven't you?
Yes.
Thank you, Emma.
All right.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're just going to pass over to Judith, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the resources that we've got in libraries. Okay, so I'll just hand over to Judith.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I'm just going to say something about some of the books and resources that we have within the library service that will help with understanding dementia, particularly dementia. So the first thing I'm going to show you is this leaflet, which is a leaflet that's been produced by the Reading Agency, which is the national organisation that helps public libraries sort of develop their offer. And this has in it a list, a curated collection of books, which are books which have been put together by librarians, health professionals, people with lived experience. And all the books that are mentioned in here are books that we have within the library service. You can look at this online on the Reading Agency's website. And the books in here we have in a variety of different formats. Sometimes we have the book, sometimes we have the ebook or the talking book, but there's a real mixture there. Listening to the conversation with Emma, I wanted to just show you this book. We've got quite a lot of books that are about personal experiences of people who have cared for someone with dementia. But just to mention this one in particular, Somebody I Used to Know by Wendy Mitchell. This has been written by a woman who was diagnosed with early onset dementia. And I've read this and found it really useful because the author describes not just how dementia manifests itself with regard to behaviour, but also describes what it feels like to have dementia, to start to forget things, to start to find familiar things unfamiliar. So I thought that was really good with regard to understanding dementia. We've got some books for children, so the children can understand a little bit about dementia when dementia, maybe their grandma or granddad has dementia. This is a really nice book, a picture book that families could share just to help children understand if someone in their family has dementia, maybe they have to go into a care home, just helps them understand and for it to feel a little bit easier for them. So this one's about Oscar. Oscar loves grandma and their times together, and their times together are always lots of fun. As she becomes less able to look after herself, she's gone into a care home. So that's something it's really interesting. And this book's produced by the British Institute for Supporting Adults with Learning Disabilities. So this is a book that there's a series of books, and this book is about helping adults with learning disabilities understand more about dementia. All the books are the same format. They're this sort of A4 size, very thin, and inside they are written with sort of line drawings and very clear. It's a very clear sort of font, so it's easy to use and help explain and understand some of the practicalities. It's very sort of to the point, and it's been quite useful with some of the groups that we've worked with. And finally, just to mention some of our Pictures to Share books. We have lots of these Pictures to Share books which can be borrowed, which are books which are produced so that carers can use them, or they can be used in care settings as sort of conversation starters, something that you can use. This one's on family life. There's one that's on A Funny Old World, and they all follow a similar format, but they've got a different theme. Hardback, easy to hold. They've been produced by a specialist company, and they tend to have a photograph or an image of something that will maybe a bit from a painting. That one shows up nicely on the screen, and by the side of it there will be a little bit of text, either a poem, that one's a lovely picture, an extract from a poem. Yeah, absolutely wonderful, these books, and they are very popular. And in the new year, which is now really, well, in the next few weeks, we are putting together some grab bags of these books, which will be available for people to pick up in the library. They'll be able to pick up a bag, and in it there will be a selection of these books that people could use in care homes or sheltered accommodation, or if you had a group or whatever. Yeah, so they're the books. So don't forget us in the library. We've got lots of information and lots of books that can support those conversations around dementia and increase understanding and empathy.
Thank you, Judith. That's brilliant. I'll just get Chris back on as well. And just to mention, our next Writer in Residence session will be in 2 weeks' time on Thursday, the 21st of January at 11 o'clock. And we will be talking about strong female writers and characters of our favourite novels. And this is part of the nationwide Unfinished Business, the Fight for Women's Rights exhibition. So please join us if you can for next time. If you want a little bit more information about it, it's at this website address. So it should be good, shouldn't it?
I'm looking forward to it. That's really good. Yeah. I've been collecting a huge, as many as I can, and believe me, the issue is there aren't many working class female writers who've managed to get their voices heard. So if anybody's got anyone brilliant that they think I might not have heard of, please don't assume I've heard of any of them, by the way. You can email the libraries, the read at kirklees.gov.uk if you've got any fab working class, in particular female writers whose voices maybe need to be heard a bit more. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you all next month, and hope everybody's taking care of themselves and keeping safe.
Okay. Right. Thank you to everybody for a fantastic session this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you. Yeah, bye. Bye.
Everybody.